While studying history at a small Christian college on the southeastern shore of Lake Michigan, a young man I will call Nolan Mercer developed a reputation for being intelligent, independent, and slightly unconventional. He was serious about school, but he was never the kind of student who disappeared quietly into the background. At one point, he helped write an opinion piece for the campus newspaper, criticizing the university library's weak collection of books and arguing that the school needed a better electronic security system to prevent theft. Students remembered him as someone with unusual interests. He loved Dungeons and Dragons. He was thoughtful, creative, and comfortable being different. Although his lifestyle was fairly conservative, he lived off campus, which gave him the image of a kind of rogue scholar. People who knew of him described someone who was bright, eccentric, and very much his own person. Nolan was also an experienced outdoorsman. He had climbed mountains while studying abroad in Europe. He had gone cross-country skiing in the areas around Lake Michigan before. Nothing about the trip he planned seemed especially dangerous or unusual. He intended to spend a weekend skiing alone through the snowy countryside near Holland, Michigan. He was expected back at the beginning of the following week. When he failed to return immediately, the concern among fellow students was mild at first. Nolan was independent. A short delay did not automatically mean something had gone wrong, but he was also dependable. When he failed to appear for his responsibilities again, people began to understand that this was not normal. Something was wrong. Accounts differ on exactly how the search began. One widely repeated version says snowmobilers near Saugatuck discovered a pair of cross-country skis and a backpack abandoned in the snow. Authorities were contacted. A missing person report was filed. Search teams began focusing on the area where Nolan had apparently started his trip. Then they found something disturbing, a trail of footprints. The prints matched the size and pattern expected from the boots Nolan had been wearing. The tracks continued for roughly 200 yards. Then they reached Lake Michigan, and there they stopped. The surface of the lake was covered in thick ice. The footprints appeared to lead directly out toward it. Search and rescue personnel reached a grim conclusion. Nolan had probably gone onto the frozen lake, broken through somewhere, and drowned beneath the ice. Yet there was a problem. The ice appeared unbroken. No obvious opening showed where he might have fallen through. No body was recovered. Still, drowning became the most widely accepted explanation. Authorities believed it might simply take time before the currents of Lake Michigan carried his remains somewhere they could be found. His family was devastated. They were forced into the terrible position that families of missing people know too well. They had no body, no final proof, no clear explanation. Only the growing belief that the person they loved was gone. They waited. Weeks passed, then months. Nothing. Meanwhile, Nolan had no idea anyone thought he was dead. Because one night, more than a year after he vanished, he opened his eyes and found himself lying on a patch of grass in a place he did not recognize. He was completely disoriented. The clothes he was wearing did not look familiar. The backpack beside him was not the one he remembered taking on his ski trip. His skis were gone. He had no memory of losing them. He had no idea where he was. He stood up and approached a stranger. "Where am I?" The person looked at him with confusion. "Pittsfield." Nolan initially assumed the stranger meant a community near Ann Arbor, Michigan. He asked how he had managed to get so far across the state. The stranger looked even more confused. This was not Michigan. This was Pittsfield, Massachusetts. To prove it, the stranger pointed toward a nearby car with a Massachusetts license plate. Nolan was stunned. He had intended to ski near Holland, Michigan. Now, he was more than 700 miles east of the place where he remembered being. He had no memory of traveling there, no memory of trains, cars, airports, hotels, friends, jobs, nothing. Then he saw a newspaper. The date printed on it revealed something even more terrifying. More than a year had passed. Nolan had not simply lost track of a day or two. He had lost roughly 15 months of his life. Somehow, during that missing period, he had traveled across a huge part of the country. He remembered having an aunt who lived in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. The town was only about 20 miles away. He had no money for a normal trip, so he hitchhiked to her home. When his aunt opened the door and saw him standing there, she felt as though she had seen a ghost. As far as the family knew, Nolan had been dead. Now he was alive. The reunion became a national story. Reporters gathered quickly. Nolan tried to explain what little he knew. When he woke in Massachusetts, he was wearing clothes different from the ones he had worn when he disappeared. His original backpack was gone. The new backpack contained maps and handmade hitchhiking signs. Those items suggested he had traveled extensively during the period he could not remember. He also had souvenirs and objects connected to places across the United States: Sacramento, San Francisco, Reno, Chicago, Utah. He had around $40 in cash. He had new glasses, sneakers, and a shirt from a marathon held in Wisconsin. The belongings seemed to tell the story of a person who had been moving from place to place for months. But the person carrying them had no memory of doing any of it. Nolan told reporters that he felt as though he had been doing a lot of running. His memory before the disappearance remained clear. He remembered the ski trip. He remembered being cold. He remembered becoming frightened that he might be lost in the frozen darkness. Then nothing. A blank space. More than a year gone. Nolan believed exhaustion and exposure might have caused some kind of blackout. He said he intended to see a medical doctor. His parents urged him to seek psychological or psychiatric help as well. He resisted. He argued that his life had been stable before the disappearance. He had been doing well in school. His father had been discussing giving him property. He had no major romantic crisis. He had employment plans. He did not believe emotional problems explained what happened. Medical examinations reportedly found him in good physical condition. That only made the mystery stranger. If he had suffered a severe head injury, where were the signs? If he had spent more than a year wandering in a confused state, how had he survived? How had he earned or found money? Where had he slept? Who had he spoken to? How had he acquired new clothing, glasses, maps, and travel souvenirs? And why did he remember absolutely none of it? His college had already awarded his bachelor's degree without him, because everyone believed he was dead. Before Nolan returned, investigators had explored increasingly desperate possibilities. At one point, detectives even sent his dental records to Chicago to see whether he might have been among unidentified victims connected to serial killer John Wayne Gacy. That was how little they understood his disappearance. The truth, when it arrived, was even stranger. He was alive. He had simply reappeared hundreds of miles away with a missing year of memory. Nolan later built a life and became a psychologist in the Pacific Northwest. For decades, he refused almost every request from journalists who wanted to discuss the disappearance. Reporters tried contacting people close to him. Even his former wife declined to explain what she knew. That wall of silence created even more speculation. Why would someone at the center of such an extraordinary mystery refuse to discuss it? Maybe the event remained confusing and painful. Maybe Nolan had no useful memories and hated being treated like a paranormal curiosity. Or maybe some people wondered. He eventually remembered something he did not want to share. The area where Nolan disappeared added fuel to those theories. His ski route was near a region often called the Lake Michigan Triangle. The name refers to a broad area stretching across parts of Lake Michigan between Wisconsin and Michigan. The region, later called the Lake Michigan Triangle, is usually described as stretching from Manitowoc, Wisconsin, across toward Ludington, Michigan, and south toward Benton Harbor. That broad shape has been associated with stories of disappearances, shipwrecks, aircraft incidents, ghostly vessels, strange lights, and unexplained navigation problems. One particularly unusual sailing story described 3 wooden boats caught in sudden fog and conflicting winds. According to the account, the wind seemed to fill the sails from opposing directions. Then all three boats performed synchronized full circles, even though no one appeared to be steering them. Many of those stories may be exaggerated. Some may be folklore. Some may have perfectly ordinary explanations. But Nolan's disappearance is not folklore. He really vanished. Authorities really searched for him. His belongings really were found. He really reappeared more than a year later in another state. And he really could not explain where he had been. A head injury remains one possible explanation. So does dissociative amnesia. Some form of psychological fugue could theoretically cause a person to travel while losing awareness of identity and later memory. But the details are still unusual. The long duration, the distance, the apparent ability to function, the new possessions, the complete lack of recall, and the strange footprints that seem to lead toward a frozen lake. Years after the disappearance, Nolan reportedly returned to the area and tried to retrace his original ski route. He hoped that seeing the landscape again might bring back a memory. Maybe a road, a building, a person, a moment that would explain the blank space. Nothing publicly changed. If he recovered any memories, he did not share them with reporters. So the questions remain. Did Nolan disappear because of a medical event, a psychological condition, an accident followed by confusion? Did someone help him? Did he spend more than a year living under another identity? Or did something happen near Lake Michigan that he either cannot remember or refuses to describe? The mystery is made even more powerful by one simple fact. Nolan came back. Most missing person cases are haunted by the absence of the person who could answer the questions. In this case, the missing man returned alive. And still, the mystery remained. Another disappearance took place in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, along the border of Tennessee and North Carolina. The mountains are famous for the bluish fog that often settles across the ridges. From a distance, the mist looks like smoke rising from the forest. The effect comes partly from natural compounds released by the dense vegetation. The explanation is scientific. The atmosphere can still feel eerie. A family from Knoxville had a tradition of taking camping trips into the Smoky Mountains around Father's Day. On one of those trips, a young boy I will call Wesley Martin joined his father, older brother, and grandfather. It was one of Wesley's first real adventures into the wilderness with the men in his family. They drove into Cades Cove, an isolated valley within the park. From there, they hiked toward Russell Field and set up camp. The following day, the family continued toward Spence Field. Spence Field is a beautiful highland meadow crossed by the Appalachian Trail and surrounded by rolling ridges and steep mountain country. When the family arrived, Wesley and his older brother began exploring around the campsite. They met other children from nearby camping groups. The kids quickly became friends. Wesley's father was happy to see him playing. It gave the adults time to set up the large family tent. Once the work was finished, the children were still running around together. At one point, they decided to play a prank on some approaching adults. The children hid. Their plan was to jump out, roar like animals, and surprise the grown-ups. Wesley's father watched them take their positions. Then the adults approached, one by one. The children burst from hiding. They laughed, growled, shouted. Everyone joined the joke, except Wesley. He did not appear. At first, his father waited. Maybe Wesley was staying hidden longer to make the prank funnier. Seconds passed. Then more. Still nothing. His father stood. He walked toward the place where he had last seen his young son. He called his name. At first, the calls were stern. Wesley, come out? The kind of voice a parent uses when a child has taken a game too far. Then the tone changed. Wesley, where are you? The calls became louder, more urgent, then desperate. Other campers realized something was wrong. The children searched the hiding places they had used. No Wesley. The adults spread out. No Wesley. His grandfather immediately organized groups. One group moved along the Appalachian Trail. Another headed back toward the ranger station. By the time park authorities were fully alerted, valuable hours had passed. Then one of the largest search operations in the history of the park began. National Park Service personnel searched. National Guard soldiers joined. Even highly trained military personnel took part. At the height of the operation, more than 1,400 people were involved in the search around Spence Field. The response was enormous. The results were almost nothing. Heavy rain made the terrain harder to search. Mud and water damaged possible tracks. So many searchers moving through the area may also have destroyed or confused evidence. Search experts later criticized parts of the operation. Too many people, too much uncontrolled movement, too little coordination in some places. At one point, a child's footprint was reportedly discovered. Searchers initially dismissed it as belonging to one of the Boy Scouts, helping with the operation. Later, investigators reconsidered. The track appeared to have been made by a child missing one shoe. It disappeared near a stream. That detail became especially important when a child's shoe and sock were reportedly found later. Some believe the track could have belonged to Wesley. If so, one of the most important clues in the case may have been misunderstood when it was first discovered. Search teams continued for more than 2 weeks. They moved across steep slopes, through dense vegetation, along creeks, into ravines. Nothing else gave a clear answer. Wesley's family offered a reward of $5,000 for information that could bring him home. The reward attracted genuine tips. It also attracted self-described psychics who claimed they could locate the missing child. None produced a result. Years later, a man who admitted illegally collecting American ginseng in the park claimed he had once discovered the skeletal remains of a child in the wilderness. He said he had been afraid to report the discovery because he did not want to be prosecuted for illegally harvesting the plant. When investigators later tried to follow up, the man could not reliably relocate the site. The claim could never be confirmed. The most common explanation is that Wesley became lost. He may have moved deeper into the forest while searching for a better hiding place. When he tried to return, everything may have looked different. At the age he was, panic could have made him walk in the wrong direction. The landscape around Spence Field includes steep slopes, thick vegetation, creeks, and ravines. A small child could fall, become injured, hide from rescuers, or die from exposure. The problem is visibility. Wesley was wearing a bright red shirt. That color should have stood out against the green forest. For searchers to miss him, he would likely have needed to be hidden beneath thick vegetation, inside a depression, or somewhere search teams did not reach. Wildlife has also been considered. Black bears live throughout the Smokies. So do venomous snakes and feral pigs. A hungry or defensive animal could be dangerous to a small child. Rangers had recently captured an underweight bear in the broader area. The animal appeared to be struggling to find food. Some people later wondered whether a desperate bear could have attacked Wesley. But animal attacks usually leave evidence. Tracks, clothing damage, blood, disturbed ground. None was found. Wesley's father believed something more sinister happened. That belief was partly based on a witness I will call Harold Kane. Harold said he heard a loud scream around the same period Wesley disappeared. Not long afterward, he reported seeing a rough-looking, bearded man moving quickly through the woods. The man had long, unkempt hair. He appeared to be trying to avoid nearby campers. Members of Harold's family also remembered seeing a flash of red near the man's shoulder. Some later wondered whether the red shape was Wesley's shirt. If that interpretation was correct, the stranger may have been carrying the child. Harold speculated the man could have been an illegal moonshiner living or working in the mountains. That might explain why he wanted to avoid being seen. Federal investigators eventually dismissed the sighting as unreliable. They believed the timing did not fit closely enough. But not everyone agreed. A retired park ranger later argued that the location of the reported sighting was downhill from where Wesley vanished. A strong person moving quickly could potentially have covered the distance in the available time. Carrying a child would have made it difficult, not impossible. The stranger was never conclusively identified. No evidence proved that Wesley was kidnapped. No evidence proved he died from exposure. No evidence proved an animal took him. He simply disappeared during a game with other children. One moment he was hiding near his family. The next, he was gone. Searchers flooded the mountains. Soldiers came. Rangers came. Volunteers came. Aircraft searched from above. Yet no confirmed trace of the child was ever recovered. Maybe the answer is simple and tragic. A wrong turn, a hidden ravine, a fall, a frightened child moving farther away each time he tried to find his way back. Or maybe the witness in the woods saw something important. A bearded stranger, a flash of red, a scream. The hardest part is that every theory ends in the same place. Wesley's family never received certainty, and sometimes not knowing can become its own kind of lifelong grief. Another heartbreaking disappearance took place on the Big South Trail in Colorado. The Big South Trail itself stretches for roughly 11 miles through rugged country. It had been established during the era of President Theodore Roosevelt. Some experienced hikers describe it as a trail of average difficulty overall. But that description can be misleading. Certain ledges narrow to only about 24 inches. A strong hiker can manage them. A tired, frightened, or inexperienced person can find them dangerous. Summer temperatures can climb into the upper 60s, while winter lows can fall to around 10 or 15 degrees. That range of conditions is part of what makes the region both beautiful and unforgiving. The trail winds through rugged mountain country and is known for steep terrain, narrow ledges, dense forest, and dramatic elevation changes. Experienced hikers generally consider it manageable, but that does not mean easy. Some sections are narrow enough that a careless step can become dangerous. The surrounding wilderness is home to elk, bobcats, black bears, and mountain lions. Summer can be pleasant. Winter can be brutally cold. The wildness of the area is part of what attracted two brothers, who I will call Mason and Grant Atadero, to create a small resort near the Poudre River. They loved the landscape. They spent so much time there that eventually the mountains stopped feeling like a place they visited and started feeling like home. For years, life around the resort was peaceful. Then a young child disappeared. A Christian singles group had been staying at the resort and helping Mason prepare the property for winter in exchange for lodging. One day, several members of the group decided to hike toward a nearby trout farm. The destination was less than 2 miles from the resort. Mason's daughter, Jocelyn, wanted to go. She was 6 years old. Her younger brother, a 3-year-old boy I will call Eli, naturally wanted to join her. Mason knew several people in the group. He trusted them, so he allowed both children to go along. Eli was excited. It was one of his first real adventures on a mountain trail. Like many energetic toddlers, he kept running ahead. Not far, usually no more than about 100 feet. The adults repeatedly called him back. He would slow down, wait, then race ahead again. At one point, the hiking group stopped to speak with some fishermen Eli had reached first. After the brief conversation, everyone continued down the trail. As the hike continued, the group gradually spread out. Some people walked faster, others fell behind. At least one adult remained near Jocelyn. Eli continued his pattern of running ahead. Then he rounded a bend in the trail. For a moment, no one worried. He had done the same thing repeatedly. He was only a short distance ahead. But when the adults reached the same bend, Eli was gone. They expected to see his little beige jacket somewhere farther down the trail. Nothing. One member of the group hurried ahead. No sign of him. They called his name. Nothing. They searched the immediate area. Nothing. The last clear image anyone had of Eli was the small boy turning that corner. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. The group searched for about an hour before members rushed back to the resort. They told Mason his son was missing. Panic took over. Mason drove out immediately. He joined the hikers. Everyone searched. They called Eli's name. They checked the trail. They looked behind rocks and trees. During this period, several people reported hearing a high-pitched scream. Jocelyn heard it too. Mason later asked his daughter what kind of scream it had been. Was it terror? Pain? Someone being attacked? She said no. To her, it sounded playful, like the sound Eli might make if someone were running up to tag him. That answer created hope. Maybe he was nearby. Maybe he had wandered only a short distance. The group searched harder. Still nothing. Eventually, Mason contacted emergency services. A large search operation began almost immediately. Search and rescue teams were mobilized. Within only a few hours of the emergency call, roughly 65 people were already involved in the first major search. As the operation expanded, that number continued to grow. Later, more than 200 searchers were involved, including about a dozen dog teams, professional trackers, divers, aircraft crews, and volunteers. Within hours, trained personnel were spread across the trail. The search expanded rapidly. People moved along the main route, into side areas, down slopes, across rocky ground. Aircraft were requested. The following morning, a United States Air Force helicopter joined the operation. It flew repeated passes over the Big South Trail. From above, searchers hoped to spot a small figure, a jacket, movement, anything. The mountain gave them nothing. Later, the helicopter returned after refueling. During another flight over the search area, the aircraft encountered dangerous mountain conditions. The helicopter lost control. It dropped more than 100 feet. The aircraft crashed through the pine canopy near the trailhead. On board were 4 United States Air Force service members and a representative from the local search and rescue team, a man I will call Mark Sheets. At the moment of the crash, Mark was not securely seated. He had been positioned near an open door, helping observe the terrain below. As the rotor struck the tops of trees, pieces of the aircraft tore through the forest. Mark tried to pull the door closed. A broken tree limb entered the cabin and struck the Air Force doctor on board, causing a serious facial injury. The helicopter came down violently. The crew managed to escape. Mark did not. He had been knocked unconscious and was trapped inside the twisted wreckage. There was also a real danger that the damaged aircraft could catch fire. Nearby rescuers rushed toward the crash. They broke through a window. They pulled Mark out. He survived, but his injuries were severe. He suffered a major concussion, a deep wound in his leg, several broken vertebrae, and a broken shoulder. The Air Force doctor suffered a fractured eye socket after being struck inside the aircraft. Mark's injuries included a deep L-shaped wound, roughly 13 inches long, 3 broken vertebrae in his lower back, a broken shoulder, and a severe concussion. The rescue itself may have added to some of those injuries because searchers had to pull him quickly from the wreckage while there was still concern the helicopter could ignite. Everyone aboard survived, but the crash badly disrupted the search. The people trying to rescue a missing child had suddenly become rescue victims themselves. Still, the search continued. Special police dive teams examined deep pools in the nearby Poudre River. Another helicopter was brought in, but mountain winds again made flying dangerous. At times, the aircraft needed near maximum power simply to remain stable. Fuel burned quickly. The helicopter was forced to withdraw. As days passed, more volunteers begged to help. Eli had been missing for nearly a week. Time was becoming critical. Authorities eventually allowed additional searchers into the operation. The number of personnel grew to more than 200. Dog teams joined, professional trackers, divers, aircraft, search and rescue specialists, volunteers. They covered enormous amounts of ground. Still nothing. No reliable footprint, no clothing, no body, no confirmed sighting, no evidence showing which direction the child had gone. Eventually, officials had to make the decision every search team fears. The large-scale operation was suspended. The search had continued day and night for more than a week. People remained in the field overnight. Searchers made noise in the hope that if Eli were alive somewhere nearby, he would hear them. Dogs worked until exhaustion. The media attention became enormous. Television trucks crowded the highway. Reporters filled the area. Camera crews arrived from across the country. The disappearance happened during a period when another famous child case was already dominating American news, so public anxiety about missing children was especially intense. Information hotlines received call after call. Some people offered useful information. Others claimed psychic abilities. Several self-described psychics insisted they knew where Eli was. None led searchers to him. A Native American medicine man reportedly came to the area and performed a ceremony asking the mountain to return the child. In another unusual but sincere gesture, a barefoot man arrived with a mule and offered to help. People wanted to do something, anything, but mountains do not respond to desperation. Years passed. Eli remained missing. Then, almost 4 years later, 2 hikers made a discovery that changed the case. I will call them Ryan Osborne and Garrett Watts. The men had chosen the Big South Trail because they wanted to explore the wild country around the Poudre Canyon. They were experienced hikers. They knew about Eli's disappearance. Anyone familiar with the area did. As parents themselves, they had discussed the case before. They assumed the most likely explanations were tragic but ordinary. Maybe the child had fallen. Maybe he had been swept into water. Maybe a mountain lion had taken him. They avoided the darker possibilities. While hiking, the men entered a steep rock field. They decided to climb roughly 2,000 feet upward through rough terrain. The climb required constant attention. Loose rock, uneven footing, steep slopes. This was not a place where anyone expected a 3-year-old child to travel. The men left the established trail. They were not intentionally conducting a professional search, but the old case was in their minds. After hiking off trail for a while, they saw something. A child's shoe. It looked surprisingly clean, almost new. Ryan and Garrett stopped. The shoe did not look as though it had been lying in mountain weather for years. Then they found another matching shoe. Nearby were more clothes, a brown fleece jacket, blue sweatpants turned inside out. The men could not believe the items belonged to Eli. The clothing looked too well preserved. Still, they photographed everything. As soon as they could, they contacted authorities. Investigators asked them to send the photographs. The images were shown to Mason. His answer stunned everyone. The clothing belonged to his son. Within a day, authorities organized another search. Sheriff's office personnel, search and rescue teams, wildlife officers, volunteers from a specialized group trained to locate human remains. Mason joined them. So did people connected to child protection organizations. The search recovered the clothing Eli had been wearing when he disappeared. The items were scattered across an area of roughly 25 feet. The fleece jacket had what looked like puncture marks. The pants were damaged, but the nylon shoes showed surprisingly little weathering. Investigators suggested that some items may have been sheltered from weather, while others remained exposed. It was a reasonable explanation. It did not satisfy everyone. Then searchers found something far more important. Roughly 180 feet north of the clothing and around 20 feet higher in elevation, they discovered a tiny fragment of human skull. It was lodged in a crevice. Nearby, on a fallen log crossing the same area, investigators found a human tooth. The remains were consistent with Eli. The mystery changed. The question was no longer whether he had somehow survived elsewhere. He had died in the mountains. But how? And how had his body reached such difficult terrain? The location bothered experienced hikers. Ryan and Garrett had struggled to reach it. They could not imagine a 3-year-old climbing there alone. That created 2 possibilities. Either Eli somehow traveled through terrain adults believed impossible for him, or something carried him. An outdoorsman and survival expert later commented on cases like this. He noted that search teams sometimes cover the same area repeatedly, only for remains or clothing to appear there much later. To him, cases like that were extremely difficult to explain. But Ryan offered a simpler possibility. Maybe the original search never covered the exact place where the clothing was found. Why would it? Search planners had limited people, limited time, and enormous territory. They had to prioritize areas a small child could realistically reach. The site was so steep and difficult that searchers may have reasonably assumed a toddler could not get there. That assumption could have been wrong, or something could have moved him. A police dog handler believed an animal encounter was the most likely explanation. Mountain lions live in Colorado. A large cat can kill quickly. It can carry prey uphill. It can hide a body. A search specialist offered a theory. If a mountain lion attacked Eli, it might have carried him away and cached the body by burying or covering it. All the search activity could then have scared the animal away. Later, after the search ended, the mountain lion might have returned and moved or uncovered the remains. That could explain why searchers found nothing during the original operation. But Mason rejected the mountain lion theory. He pointed to the clothing. Investigators reportedly found no mountain lion hair, no clear animal deoxyribonucleic acid, no blood pattern proving an attack. Mason argued that a big cat attacking a child would likely damage the jacket badly. Yet the jacket remained mostly intact. He also focused on the shoes. If a mountain lion dragged Eli hundreds of feet up rough terrain, the shoes should have shown significant scraping or damage. They did not. The pants were found inside out. To Mason, that looked as though someone had pulled them off quickly, not something done by claws or teeth. Some reports suggested the absence of biological evidence on the clothing could mean the clothes were removed before the child was attacked. For a grieving father, that possibility was horrifying. If the clothes were removed first, by whom and why? Another problem with the mountain lion theory is probability. Fatal mountain lion attacks in the United States and Canada have historically been very rare. Supporters of the animal theory point out that rare does not mean impossible. Critics answer that historical records list only a very small number of fatal mountain lion attacks across the United States and Canada over more than a century. One frequently cited figure is 14 reported fatal attacks. That makes the event statistically unusual, especially because Eli disappeared while traveling with a large group. Eli was also part of a large hiking group. For an animal to take him, it would have needed to approach very close to people without being seen. Still, rare does not mean impossible. A small child running ahead around a blind corner could briefly become isolated. A mountain lion is fast, quiet, powerful. It would not need much time. The adults in the hiking group were investigated. Detectives interviewed them carefully. No major red flags were found. No evidence linked any member of the group to a crime. That left the case in an uncomfortable place. Natural accident, predator attack, human involvement. Every theory explained something. None explained everything. The almost pristine shoes, the inside-out pants, the difficult elevation, the scattered clothing, the tiny amount of human remains, the location far above the trail, and the fact that a massive search involving hundreds of people, dogs, aircraft, and professional trackers had found nothing there years earlier. As often happens with mysteries, more extreme theories appeared. Cryptids, unknown predators, alien abduction, government secrecy. But none of those ideas produced evidence either. Mason never accepted a simple answer. He believed someone, somewhere, knew more than they were saying. Whether he was right may never be known. What is certain is that Eli rounded a corner on a mountain trail. Within moments, he vanished. Years later, pieces of his clothing and remains were found in a place many experienced hikers believed he could not have reached alone. That is why the case remains so haunting. The discovery brought part of an answer. It did not bring peace. The final disappearance began with a Canadian student and army reservist who had moved to Australia to study law. I will call him Adrian Serran. Adrian grew up in Toronto. He was intelligent, physically capable, disciplined, and ambitious. He moved to Australia to attend Bond University on the Gold Coast. He was in his mid-20s when he returned briefly to Canada to visit family and friends during a university break. Afterward, he flew back to Australia to continue his studies. Before returning fully to his academic routine, Adrian planned a hiking trip in the mountains of New South Wales. He stayed with friends in Sydney for several nights. They believed he intended to travel by train toward the mountain region. One day, they drove him to Padstow railway station with his camping equipment. As far as they knew, Adrian was beginning his hiking trip. Then something strange happened. He returned to Sydney almost immediately. Instead of continuing his original travel plan, Adrian rented a van from a rental company. The vehicle was supposed to be returned in Melbourne a couple of days later. On the surface, renting a van was not unusual. The mountain region he wanted to visit lies between Sydney and Melbourne. A road trip made sense. What did not make sense was why Adrian had apparently begun traveling by train, then suddenly turned around, returned to Sydney, and rented a vehicle instead. Later, closed-circuit television footage captured him at a convenience store in Jindabyne. He appeared to be purchasing supplies. That night, investigators believed he slept in the rental van, rather than contacting his friends or booking normal accommodation. The next morning, Adrian drove to Charlotte Pass, a ski resort and access point for mountain trails. Instead of parking in an ordinary visitor area, he left the van in a staff parking lot. That small detail later stood out. Adrian was usually careful and intelligent. Using restricted parking could risk a fine or towing. Yet he seemed unconcerned. Perhaps he was distracted. Perhaps he was under stress. Or perhaps something else felt more urgent. Then investigators discovered something even more confusing. Most of Adrian's important hiking equipment remained inside the van. His map, compass, global positioning system, tent, cold weather clothing. These were not luxury items. They were basic survival equipment, the kind of things an experienced and thoughtful hiker should never leave behind in unpredictable mountain conditions. His mobile phone was not inside the vehicle. One food package appeared to have been opened. That suggested he took at least some food and his phone with him. Then he walked toward the main range track. He never returned. Other hikers who had been in the area described how quickly the weather changed. The morning began pleasant and sunny. Conditions appeared suitable for hiking. Then, around the middle of the day, the temperature dropped. A severe blizzard swept across the mountains with astonishing speed. In some places, roughly 30 centimeters of snow fell. Visibility collapsed. At times, a person could see only a few feet ahead. A trail that had been easy to follow could disappear almost instantly beneath snow. Landmarks vanished into white. Wind and cold turned an ordinary hike into a survival emergency. Meanwhile, the rental company began trying to contact Adrian because the van had not been returned as scheduled. He did not answer. Several days passed. The caretaker at Charlotte Pass noticed that the same van had remained parked without any sign of activity. Fresh snow around it appeared undisturbed. Then the caretaker noticed that the vehicle displayed only a one-day entry permit. That was a serious warning sign. He contacted the rental company. They confirmed that the renter was overdue and could not be reached. Police were notified. Authorities initially faced delays while trying to contact the rental company's main office in New Zealand. Time zones and communication slowed the process. Eventually, officers confirmed Adrian was missing. His family in Canada was notified. A search began. At first, only a small number of national parks and wildlife rangers searched the general area. Police attempted to locate Adrian through his phone. But because the device had been disconnected from the mobile network for several days, normal triangulation was not immediately possible. The operation expanded. A full state emergency search was launched. 2 helicopters joined. Around 50 search and rescue personnel moved through the mountains on foot, skis, and snow vehicles. Then came one of the most disturbing reports in the case. 2 national parks employees were performing maintenance work on a mountain survival shelter when they heard what sounded like an adult man shouting for help. The voice seemed to come from somewhere north of the shelter. The rangers immediately tried to locate the person. Then the cries stopped. They searched. Nothing. A helicopter flew low over the area. No one was seen. Later, a skier in an area known as Little Austria reported hearing a voice around the same period. The direction was similar. Two independent reports appeared to support each other. Someone may have been alive in the mountains and calling for help, but no physical trace was found. Days after Adrian disappeared, police asked the mobile provider to install portable repeater stations in key locations. One was placed near the main range track at Charlotte Pass, another near the Mount Kosciuszko area. The goal was to reconstruct any remaining information from Adrian's phone. Eventually, the provider gave police data suggesting the device had followed the main range track in an anti-clockwise direction. Then the signal appeared to leave the established route toward Mount Townsend. Contact was lost somewhere around the northwestern side of the mountain. That information gave searchers a more focused area. Private investigators hired by Adrian's family believed they were getting closer. They urged the family not to give up, but time was working against them. A doctor specializing in wilderness survivability advised authorities that, considering the severe weather, terrain, and lack of proper equipment, Adrian was unlikely to survive indefinitely. Without any attempt to contact rescuers and with no confirmed shelter, his chances became increasingly poor after roughly 2 weeks. Police scaled back the official search. They told the family not to abandon hope completely. But the message was clear. The operation was changing from rescue to recovery. Adrian's family refused to stop. They organized a privately funded search. They offered a reward of $100,000 for information that led to Adrian being found. They also offered members of the public $250 per day to help search the mountain region. People came for different reasons. Some may have been attracted by the money. Others simply wanted to help. Among them was a group of Canadian soldiers who promised to do everything they could to bring a fellow soldier home. Searchers continued moving through difficult terrain. Then the Australian winter deepened. Heavy snow covered more ground. The mountains became even harder to search. Adrian's family spent more than $200,000 on private investigators and search efforts. Eventually, they were forced to stop the large private operation. The financial reward was later withdrawn. Authorities conducted additional smaller searches when warmer weather melted some of the snow and made previously inaccessible areas easier to examine. Still nothing. No backpack, no clothing, no phone, no remains, no confirmed campsite, no physical evidence showing where Adrian spent his final hours. Years later, a coroner legally declared him dead. The official conclusion was that Adrian most likely died from exposure after becoming trapped by the sudden blizzard. Investigators believed he was somewhere near the northwestern side of Mount Townsend. It is the most straightforward explanation. He left essential equipment in the van. Weather changed violently. Visibility collapsed. He moved away from the main trail. Cold and wind would have become dangerous quickly. Yet his family struggled to accept an ending without a body. They continued believing that miracles were possible. Maybe Adrian survived. Maybe someone found him. Maybe something happened beyond the search area. Hope can survive long after probability becomes cruel. But the mountains offer another possibility. Nature does not need a mystery to become deadly. A warm morning can become a blizzard. A familiar trail can disappear. A strong, educated, trained person can make one unusual decision and suddenly find himself in conditions no amount of confidence can control. The questions remain. Why did Adrian abandon his original travel plan? Why did he return to Sydney and rent a van? Why did he sleep inside it? Why did he park in a staff area? Most importantly, why did he leave his map, compass, global positioning equipment, tent, and cold weather clothing behind? Was he rushing? Confused? Emotionally distressed? Did he believe he was only going for a short walk? Did something draw him farther from the vehicle than he intended? And were the voices heard near the survival shelter really his? If they were, then Adrian may have survived for days in brutal conditions while rescue teams searched nearby. That possibility is heartbreaking. So is the idea that he died alone in a landscape vast enough to hide every trace of him. Across these 4 disappearances, the details are very different. One young man vanished near Lake Michigan and returned more than a year later, hundreds of miles away, with no memory of where he had been. One little boy disappeared during a game in the Great Smoky Mountains and was never conclusively found. Another child vanished around a bend on a Colorado trail, only for clothing and small remains to appear years later in terrain. People believed he could not have reached alone. And one university student entered the Australian mountains just before a sudden blizzard and disappeared so completely that even enormous searches found almost nothing. These stories naturally make us ask strange questions. Did someone intervene? Did search teams miss something obvious? Did an animal carry someone away? Did memory fail? Did weather erase the evidence? Did a frightened person make a decision that seemed logical in the moment but became fatal? Or are there parts of these cases that will simply never fit into a clean explanation? We may never know, but there is something important to remember when talking about mysteries like these. The missing are not puzzles first. They are people first. Nolan was a student, a son, a young man with academic plans, a job waiting, and a future he expected to understand. Wesley was a child playing with other children while his father watched nearby. Eli was a 3-year-old boy, excited to be included on an outdoor adventure with his sister. Adrian was a student, soldier, friend, and family member, building a life across 2 countries. Their disappearances are fascinating because the evidence is strange. But behind every strange detail is a family that had to wake up the next morning without an answer. That is the part worth holding on to. Mystery can make us curious. Compassion should keep us grounded. These cases also remind us that preparation matters. Nature can be beautiful without being gentle. A calm lake can become deadly. A familiar forest can disorient a child. A mountain trail can turn dangerous in minutes. Weather does not care how intelligent, experienced, or physically strong we are. When we go into wilderness, simple choices matter. Tell someone exactly where you are going. Carry navigation tools. Bring clothing for weather worse than the forecast. Stay with the group. Do not let children move out of sight. And when conditions change, turning back is not failure. Sometimes the strongest decision is the one that gets everyone home. There is another lesson in the way we respond after something goes wrong. Searchers in these stories made mistakes. Clues may have been dismissed. Areas may have been overlooked. Weather, crowds, accidents, and limited information made difficult situations even harder. It is easy to judge those decisions years later. But people searching in real time do not have the full story. They work with uncertainty. That does not mean mistakes should be ignored. It means accountability should lead to improvement, not cruelty. Every failed search can teach the next team how to search better. Every overlooked clue can change procedures. Every tragedy can become a reason to prepare more carefully. Families also deserve kindness. People who lose someone without answers live in a unique kind of grief. They cannot fully mourn. They cannot fully hope. Every phone call might be news. Every unknown number might change everything. A stranger who looks familiar can stop their heart. Years can pass while part of the family remains frozen at the moment the person disappeared. We should never treat that pain casually, and we should never create false hope for attention. Hope is powerful. It should be handled gently. Forgiveness matters too. Parents often blame themselves. Why did I let my child go? Why didn't I watch more closely? Why didn't I insist on different plans? Friends ask why they did not notice something. Searchers wonder whether they missed a footprint. Survivors replay every decision. But hindsight is merciless. It gives us information the people in the moment did not have. Responsibility means learning from what happened. It does not mean carrying endless punishment for every decision made without knowing the future. Sometimes living kindly means extending the same compassion to ourselves that we would offer someone else. We can admit mistakes. We can change. We can prepare better. We can forgive without forgetting. And when there is no answer, we can resist the temptation to invent one just because uncertainty feels unbearable. Sometimes the most honest sentence is still the hardest. We don't know. That does not mean we stop caring. It does not mean we stop searching when real possibilities remain. It simply means we respect the difference between evidence and imagination. Maybe one day new technology will answer some of these cases. A forgotten record, a recovered phone, a new witness, a piece of genetic evidence, a memory finally returning. Until then, the best thing we can do is remember the people, learn from what happened, and value the ordinary moments that mysteries like these suddenly take away. A family meal, a phone call home, a child laughing nearby, a friend returning safely from a hike. Those moments seem small until they are gone. So take care of the people around you. Tell someone where you're going. Listen when your instincts tell you something is wrong. And when someone you love walks out the door, never assume you will have unlimited chances to say what matters. There is one more lesson worth carrying from these cases. When someone disappears, the people left behind often spend years replaying one final moment. A father remembers allowing a child to join a hike. A friend remembers dropping someone at a station. A searcher remembers dismissing a footprint. A family member remembers the last phone call. It is natural to ask, what could have been done differently? But guilt can become cruel when it pretends we should have known the future. We make decisions using the information available at the time. That does not remove responsibility when someone acts carelessly. It simply reminds us that regret and responsibility are not the same thing. We can learn without destroying ourselves. We can become more careful without believing every tragedy was preventable. We can honor the missing by making better choices in the future. And when someone does return, as Nolan did, we should remember that survival does not automatically provide closure. A person can come home and still carry unanswered questions. They may not want to explain every detail publicly. They may need privacy. They may need medical care. They may need time to understand their own memory before strangers demand an explanation. Curiosity does not give us ownership of another person's pain. Sometimes respecting someone means allowing them to remain silent. The same kindness should guide the way we speak about families who continue hoping. Hope can look irrational from the outside. For the family, it may be the only bridge between one day and the next. We can respect that hope without making promises we cannot support. We can say, I hope with you. We can also say, I don't know. Both can be honest. That balance between hope and truth is one of the hardest forms of compassion. And perhaps that is what all four mysteries ask from us. Be curious, be careful, be honest about what is known and what is only a theory. Respect the wilderness, respect evidence, respect grief. And remember that behind every missing person poster, every search map, every strange photograph, and every unanswered question, there is a human being whose life meant far more than the mystery that came after. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can find future narrations when they are released. If you have a story of your own, you can submit it to the Let's Read official community on Reddit, where listeners can share feedback and where your story may be considered for a future narration. You can also join a live stream for opportunities to connect with the Discord community. If you would like to support the channel further, early access to future narrations is available through Patreon for $1 a month. Let's Read merchandise is also available through Spreadshirt, and the Let's Read podcast offers longer story compilations wherever you normally listen to podcasts. The relevant links can be found in the description. Thanks so much, friends. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And I'll see you again soon.